The older I become, the more I realize that life no longer teaches through loud moments. It teaches in silence. In the quiet mornings when I sit alone with a cup of coffee. In the evenings when the house grows still and memories quietly find their way back to me. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up wondering why no one ever shared these simple truths with me when I was younger. For many years, I believed wisdom came from books, successful people, or those who seemed to have all the answers. I couldn't have been more wrong. Real wisdom doesn't arrive all at once. It gathers slowly through disappointments, mistakes, unexpected joys, painful goodbyes, and countless ordinary days that only make sense when you look back. I've learned that growing older isn't really about wrinkles or gray hair. Those are just reminders that time has passed. The real change happens inside. One day you suddenly notice that your heart has become quieter. You stop chasing things that once seemed important. You begin valuing peace more than proving yourself right. And that's when life finally starts making sense. Today I want to share a few of those lessons with you. Not because I think I know everything, but because I've spent enough years making mistakes to recognize them when I see them. Maybe one of these stories will save you from carrying a burden that was never meant to be yours. The first lesson took me decades to understand. Letting go isn't losing. Sometimes it's finally allowing yourself to breathe again. When I was younger, I believed that holding on showed strength. I held on to people, memories, old routines, and even pain. I thought that if I let go, I would somehow be betraying the past. But life has a gentle way of proving us wrong. After my wife passed away, I couldn't bring myself to change anything inside our home. Her favorite sweater still hung behind the bedroom door. Her reading glasses stayed on the nightstand exactly where she had left them. Every morning I looked at the same coffee mug she always used. I even avoided opening certain drawers because I knew her handwriting or an old photograph might be waiting inside. At first, I told myself these things brought me comfort. Maybe they did. But after a while, I noticed something had changed. The house no longer felt like a place filled with love. It felt like a museum. Everything stood exactly where it had always been, yet somehow the rooms felt emptier than ever. I wasn't preserving memories anymore. I was trapping myself inside them. Then something happened that completely changed my perspective. One afternoon my granddaughter came to visit. She was laughing, running through the house like children do, filling every room with life. While playing, she accidentally knocked over my wife's favorite perfume bottle. It shattered across the floor. For a moment, everything became silent. I stared at those broken pieces, expecting to feel angry or devastated. Instead, I cried. Not because the bottle was gone. I cried because I suddenly understood that I had been protecting an object instead of protecting the beautiful memories it represented. That perfume wasn't my wife. The love we shared wasn't trapped inside a bottle. It lived inside me. No broken glass could ever take away the evenings we spent talking on the porch. No empty closet could erase the vacations we laughed through. No missing sweater could remove the warmth of her hand resting in mine. That afternoon I realized something I wish I had understood years earlier. Love doesn't disappear when objects disappear. Real love lives inside our hearts. From that day on, I slowly began giving some of her clothes to people who truly needed them. I packed away a few things, kept only those that genuinely made me smile, and finally allowed the house to become a home again. I wasn't forgetting her. I was making room for life to continue. Sometimes we hold on to things simply because we're afraid of who we'll become without them. But here's what I've learned. Every chapter of life asks us to release something before it gives us something new. The second lesson hurt even more. Being kind doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. For most of my life, I believed that saying yes made me a good person. If someone needed help, I was there. If someone asked for money, I found a way. If someone disappointed me, I forgave them almost immediately. I thought that's what decent people were supposed to do. But I slowly discovered that kindness without boundaries becomes exhaustion. I remember a close friend of mine who spent years trying to rescue his adult son from one bad decision after another. Every few months there was another emergency. Another unpaid bill. Another promise that, this time things would be different. My friend sold valuable belongings, postponed his retirement plans, borrowed money, and ignored his own health because he believed a father's love meant never giving up. One afternoon I visited him. I barely recognized the man sitting in front of me. He looked tired. Not physically. Spiritually. His eyes had lost the light they once carried. He quietly admitted something that broke my heart. I've spent so many years trying to save him that I forgot to save myself. Those words stayed with me. Because I realized many of us do exactly the same thing. We pour everything into people who never stop taking. We confuse guilt with love. We confuse sacrifice with loyalty. We keep hoping that if we just try a little harder, they'll finally change. Sometimes they do. Many times they don't. And here's the painful truth I've learned. You cannot help someone who refuses to help themselves. You cannot heal another person's wounds by constantly creating your own. Love should never require you to abandon yourself. Real compassion includes compassion for yourself as well. One of the hardest sentences I've ever learned to say is this: I love you, but I can't continue hurting myself to protect your choices. At first those words felt selfish. Today they feel honest. Because protecting your peace doesn't make you cruel. It makes you wise. Another lesson arrived on a birthday I will never forget. I had invited my children over weeks in advance. Nothing extravagant. Just a simple dinner together. I cooked slowly all afternoon, prepared everyone's favorite dishes, even set the table with the good plates we usually saved for holidays. As evening approached, one by one, the messages began arriving. Sorry, Dad, something came up. We'll celebrate another day. I can't make it. I smiled as I replied. No problem. I understand. And maybe I truly did. But after washing the dishes and sitting alone on the porch that evening, I found myself whispering something I never expected to say. I would never have done that to my parents. That wasn't anger speaking. It was disappointment. For a long time I kept asking myself why people didn't care the way I cared. Eventually I found the answer. Because not everyone loves the way I love. Not everyone keeps promises the way I do. Not everyone notices small acts of kindness. And that's okay. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It simply means they're different. The mistake I made for years was expecting everyone to have the same heart I had. Once I stopped expecting people to think exactly like me, life became much lighter. I no longer measured my worth by someone else's attention. I stopped taking every disappointment personally. And strangely enough, that gave me more peace than almost anything else I've learned in my entire life. As I grew older, I discovered another truth that changed the way I live. You cannot change someone who doesn't believe they need to change. I spent years trying. Sometimes it was with friends. Sometimes with family. Sometimes with people I loved so deeply that I convinced myself it was my responsibility to save them. I offered advice they never asked for. I had long conversations, hoping the right words would finally reach them. I explained. I encouraged. I forgave. I waited. Then I tried again. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't helping them. I was exhausting myself. One person in particular comes to mind. He had been part of my life for decades. We had shared holidays, celebrated birthdays together, and helped each other through difficult seasons. But little by little, our friendship became one-sided. Every conversation revolved around his problems. Every favor flowed in one direction. Whenever I tried to express how I felt, he would smile and say, "You're overthinking it." At first I believed him. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I expected too much. But after hearing those same words for years, something inside me finally became quiet. Not angry. Not bitter. Just clear. One afternoon I caught myself asking a simple question. If someone truly values me, why do I always leave feeling smaller than when I arrived? That single question changed everything. I stopped trying to convince him to understand me. I stopped explaining my feelings over and over again. I stopped waiting for an apology that was never coming. Instead, I quietly stepped back. There was no dramatic goodbye. No argument. No long message. Just silence. And to my surprise, that silence brought more healing than years of conversations ever had. That's when I learned one of the greatest lessons of growing older. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some people are only meant to walk beside us for one chapter. Trying to force them into the next chapter only creates more pain. Another lesson arrived when I least expected it. For most of my life, I worried far too much about what other people thought of me. Would they approve? Would they judge me? Would they think I had made the wrong decision? I spent years editing myself so that everyone around me would feel comfortable. Then something happened that made me laugh at myself. At my granddaughter's wedding, music filled the room, and everyone else was dancing. Normally, I would have stayed in my chair. I always believed I wasn't a good dancer. I imagined people watching me, quietly judging every awkward step. But that evening something inside me whispered, "What if nobody is thinking about you at all?" So I stood up. I walked onto the dance floor. I danced terribly. I missed the rhythm. I laughed harder than I had laughed in years. When the song ended, a young man I had never met walked over to me. He smiled and said, "I hope I'm still enjoying life like that when I'm your age." Those words stayed with me. For decades I had imagined people criticizing me. Instead, they admired my freedom. How many years had I wasted worrying about opinions that never existed? The older I become, the more I understand something very simple. Most people are too busy thinking about their own lives to spend much time judging mine. That realization is incredibly liberating. These days I wear what feels comfortable. I go where I want to go. I say no without guilt. I no longer apologize for enjoying a quiet life. Because peace is far more valuable than approval. Another lesson surprised me even more. Taking care of yourself is not vanity. It's self-respect. There was a time after my retirement when I stopped making an effort. Some mornings I stayed in the same old sweater all day. I skipped shaving. I told myself, who am I trying to impress? Then one morning I caught my reflection in the window. I hardly recognized the man looking back. Not because he looked older. Because he looked like someone who had quietly given up. That hurt. From that day forward, I made one small promise to myself. Every morning I would get dressed as if life still mattered. Because it does. A clean shirt. A fresh shave. A little cologne. Nothing expensive. Nothing fancy. Just enough to remind myself that I still deserved my own respect. I wasn't dressing for strangers. I was dressing for the man who had survived every difficult year of his life. And every single morning that simple habit reminded me of something important. Growing older does not mean becoming invisible. It means appreciating yourself in ways you never learned when you were young. Perhaps the most difficult lesson of all was learning the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. For years I believed forgiving someone meant welcoming them back into my life. Now I know those are two completely different things. I can forgive someone without allowing them to hurt me again. I can wish them peace while protecting my own. Forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. It isn't saying their behavior was acceptable. Forgiveness is simply deciding that I will no longer carry the weight of their actions every single day. That burden belongs to the past, not to my future. The older I become, the less interested I am in winning arguments. I'd rather keep my peace. I'd rather protect my health. I'd rather spend an afternoon sitting beneath a tree listening to birds than proving someone else was wrong. Life becomes much simpler when you stop trying to change everyone around you. One final lesson has become more valuable than all the others. Time is the only thing we can never earn back. Money can be replaced. Possessions can be replaced. Even broken dreams sometimes lead us somewhere better. But a single day, once it passes, it's gone forever. That's why I no longer postpone happiness. I call the people I love. I take the walk. I watch the sunset. I forgive faster. I laugh louder. And I say, I love you, more often than I used to. Because someday one of those ordinary moments will quietly become a beautiful memory. If there's one thing I hope you remember from everything I've shared today, it's this: growing older is not about losing life. It's about finally seeing what truly matters. You don't need to carry every disappointment. You don't need everyone's approval. You don't need to fix every broken person who enters your life. You only need enough courage to protect your peace, enough wisdom to appreciate each new day, and enough gratitude to recognize that every morning you wake up is another opportunity to live well. Today, I move a little slower than I once did. My hair has turned gray. My hands tell the story of many years. But my heart has never felt lighter. Not because life became easier. Because I finally stopped carrying what was never mine to carry. And if you're listening to me today, perhaps it's time for you to do the same. Life becomes quieter as we grow older. But if you truly listen, those quiet years often teach us the greatest lessons of all.